Dear business owners, welcome to lesson 2 of my accounting series. So, this is definitely a pain point. Well, what I'll be talking about today is a pain point for a lot of business owners. And I'll certainly be building on what I talked about last week, right? So, last week I talked about commingling funds, and just don't do it. It's very dangerous. And today we'll be building on that so that you can truly understand why commingling a fund can be very disruptive. But of course, per usual, we'll talk about things that we can put in place to mitigate um, mitigate when you're commingling, right? So what can you do to stop commingling, and here's what you can do. And that falls in line with what we're talking about today, which you can see in the track running below. It says track it or lose it, right? So either you track your business expenses or you will actually lose it. Okay, so we definitely want to make sure that we are taking heed to all the different points that are being made today. Okay, with that being said, my name is Rose Brown, also known as the accountant therapist, and I am the CEO of Brown Swift Women Consulting and Accounting Firm. Okay, so again, Dear Business Owners is geared towards all my entrepreneurs and business owners, and this is looking or speaking to you from the accounting perspective, right? A lot of times I come across clients who are just lost. They just don't know. And until they're informed, they continue to do the same thing. So my aim and desire through these lessons is to help you to get to a place where you're not constantly making the same mistakes, right? So let's dive right into it. So again, we're talking about track it or lose it. It's either you track your expenses or you lose them. It's just that easy. It's either you know what has happened and you can prove what has happened, or you don't and you just pay more taxes, right? And I mean, who really wants to pay more taxes? Because think about it. If you're ever in an audit, at first glance, the IRS is going to say, can you show me the proof of that? And honestly, if you can't, it's a lose-lose situation. All right. So let's jump right into it. So when you are not tracking your business expenses, it's the same term as I used last week. You're robbing yourself of tax deductions, because if you're not able to take advantage of it, that means you're not able to use it. When you're not able to use it, that means you're paying taxes on that amount twice, right? Because let's say, for example, 2020, you made a purchase. 2020, you had a net profit within your business, right? Great. But that money that you had a net profit on, you pay taxes on it. For 2021, you went out, you purchased something, you don't have the receipt. If you don't have the receipt or proof that it actually happened, you're actually not able to write that off, right? Not in appropriately write that off. So that means you would have to pay taxes on that same money twice. So that's the first and foremost. You don't track it, you lose it, you pay more taxes. Okay? All right. So for a lot of people, they'll say, hey, you know what? It's no big deal. It's a small expense. It's nothing. But I have to say, every little bit counts, because you never know how much of that $50 will add up to, $3,000 at year end. You have to make sure that everything is trackable no matter the amount, right? So everything that goes into your business and come out, you need to have a recollection of it, regardless of what it is, especially from an accountant or financial perspective. You have an expense, document it. You got money, document it. Everything needs documentation. Okay? All right, so now that we talked about that, it's a problem. So we need to discuss the solution to this problem, right? So the first thing you'll always want to do, literally, if you just started your business, you got your LLC and whatnot, you need your operating agreement, you need to head to the bank. The first thing you need to do is get that bank account, that business bank account. So that sets in motion a base for helping you to avoid commingling and also putting you in a position of tracking those business expenses, right? Because if you don't have a dedicated business bank account, things are happening all over the place. You can't track it. It just becomes chaotic. So the first place to build that foundation is to get that business bank account. When you have that business bank account, right, you want to apply some discipline. Hey, I am using this only for business and not personal, right? So with that being said, when you have that business bank account, it helps you to avoid commingling of funds. Not that you will 100% not do it, because honestly, life happens, things happen, but you have to make sure that you're accounted for things accordingly. And this is the best way to get things going and started, because if you have a separate business bank account and you do not keep track of your expense, well, you do not do bookkeeping throughout the year, but you have this one business bank account that you use only for business, it will be much easier for you to do bookkeeping at year end. And it's not something that I recommend. It needs to be done monthly. But if you are in that position where you have to do it year end, if you have that one business bank account, you know that everything that goes through this is business. One less thing for you to worry about, because now you know, hey, anything that I purchase from Walmart with this card is business. Anything from Amazon with this card is business. It keeps things much simpler for you. It reduces your frustration level. It just puts you in a much better position, right? All right. So once we've established that account, now we need to put something else in place, and that is to establish a bookkeeping system. And this looks different for a lot of people. I oftentimes say one size does not fit all, regardless of if you guys are in the same industry, right? So, or if you guys are family members, it doesn't matter. What you do does not work for another person, and vice versa. And again, even if you're in the same industry, it's very important to notate that. So the bookkeeping system that you use or put in place needs to be unique to you, right? We need to tailor that to make sure that it works for you, because you don't want to take on something and it just doesn't work and you fall out of line. You paid money to put it in place. Now you have to pay to clean up because you didn't stick to it. So those sorts of things, you want to make sure that you establish something that works for you and your business. Okay. So I'm going to talk about 3 approaches to bookkeeping. And usually when you're just starting out your business, you may not have too much going on, and you may have time on your hand to be able to, administrate your books and things of that sort. So in that situation, you're oftentimes doing it yourself, DIY, right? So when you do it yourself, that's just you doing it. You want to make sure that you set aside at least an hour to 2 hours per week to just focus on this. Like when it comes down to money, you want to make sure that you're detail oriented. Even if generally you're not detail oriented, you need to know, where did this $10 go? Because if you don't look for $10, and I know $10 and $100, it's a material difference, but that's how things begin to slip by. $10 each month, you don't know what happened. It begins to cost you, right? Reduce your bottom line. All right. So if you do it yourself, if you're old school, that's okay. Just grab a notebook and write it down. Dedicate that notebook to your bookkeeping for your business. And even if you drive Lyft or something of that sort, you still need something to make sure that you're accounting for everything that happens. Because again, if you're a Lyft driver and you're paying for gas at the pump and you don't retain any proof of that, or it's not on a business bank account, it becomes difficult to track that. So if you want to just go ahead, get that notebook, just edit it, date it, those sorts of things. Keep it close by in the car while you're driving, or right at your desk, whatever it is that you're doing. But again, if you're old school traditional and you want to keep it that way, keep it simple. Do what works for you. To start, we can develop as we go along. Okay. So the next one I would recommend is Excel. And of course, not a lot of folks are too familiar with it, or you can use Google Sheets. That also works. But either you want to connect with someone to create a template that works for you, or you can just create something that works for yourself. So you want to make sure that you keep that going, right? Or if you decide, hey, I don't want to do a whole bunch of manual labor or manual entry with the Excel or the notebook, you want to get an accounting software, right? So that's the age we're moving in, where things are a little bit more automated instead of you having to manually enter things. So with that, you can always use an accounting software. There's quite a few out there these days. Get your feet in the water, wet it, see what works for you. So you have QuickBooks Online, you have Waves, you have FreshBooks. So things can look different depending on what works for you. But what I would say with the accounting software, whether or not you've done your research, make sure that you connect with a professional to make sure that you understand how to actually use the software if you are going to do it yourself. Okay? All right, so that's usually in the starting phase of business, because honestly, it's not recommended that you do this yourself forever. You need to grow, and in order to grow, you need to delegate and outsource if necessary so that you can have time to refocus elsewhere. So usually, again, DIY is when you have time on your hands but you don't have enough funds, and you can just go ahead and do it yourself. But if you're in that position where you don't have enough time, you have funds, or you're willing to make that investment to give you more time to refocus within your business, then you want to outsource it to, say, an accounting firm or a bookkeeper who is knowledgeable with your industry, what you do, and make sure that you guys are speaking the same language, right? Because accounting is a language in and of itself. So what I am saying, I need to be able to break it down to your level so that you can understand as much as possible. So for me, whenever a client comes and they're inquiring about bookkeeping, right? So I am a advanced QuickBooks Pro advisor, right? So I know QuickBooks very well. I'm able to clean it up, set it up, do whatever I need to do, and I can outfit it to fit whatever industry you're in. So I know the product. So you have to make sure that if you are going to outsource, these folks understand your needs and can set up the software to reflect your business and how you want to see it. Of course, it could be, hey, I want to see reports looking a certain way, those sorts of things. You have to have that conversation. You have to be transparent upfront, and you have to ask those hard questions. I've had clients ask me questions and I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, but that's just how it goes. And I highly recommend that, because you never know what a person is thinking. So it's better you just say it out. What do you need? Say what you need, because you're about to pay for this and you have to make sure that it's worth it. Okay. So the next part, the next approach, right? We talked about DIY and then outsourcing. So let's say either you're growing to the point where you need an in-person accountant to come, or an in-person bookkeeper, to come to your actual location and do the bookkeeping. Or let's say your business is structured, or its operation is done in a particular way, and you need someone within house to be able to track everything that's happening. This way it's accounted for the way that you want it to be accounted for. Okay, so you have DIY, outsource, or hire an in-person bookkeeper, an in-house bookkeeper. Okay, regardless of each of these approach that you take, you want to make sure that you retain digital copy of all these receipts and invoices. I won't say a paper copy, because honestly, the ink on those are running out pretty quickly. You don't want to lose it and those sorts of things. So you want to make sure that you put a system in place, or somewhere on your cloud, your desktop, wherever it is, you want to make sure that you're saving digital copies of these receipts, so you have backup to the backup, or just backup altogether, right? So I know for a lot of folks, it's like, well, I make a lot of cash transactions. I buy a lot of cash things. So when you take the money out of the business bank account, you want to make sure that you're retaining those receipts, right? And you're recording them accordingly. Depending on the approach, the bookkeeping approach that you're using, you want to make sure that you record it accordingly, right? If it's you doing it yourself, you have it right there, record it, save that receipt. And again, this is if it's cash. And if it's an outsourced bookkeeper that you're using, make sure that you provide a copy of that cash receipt, because honestly, with those cash receipts, that's where I see a lot of people lose their deductions, because they don't track it. They just go to the store, buy cash, and just throw out the receipt, or just never present it to whomever's doing the bookkeeping. And if the bookkeeper doesn't know, they don't know. They only know what you provide to them. So you want to make sure that you're always on the same page. Okay. And if it's a case where you used your own personal money to make these purchases, it's still the same situation, right? From an accounting perspective, when it's recorded, it looks different, but it's still a business write-off if you purchased it for business. That's why that receipt will be crucial. You want to make sure that you're tracking everything so that you don't lose it. Okay. All right. So with all of these, right, you want to make sure you try it on, you test it out, and you kind of see what works for you, right? Because you want to ensure that you keep things consistent. You don't want to, start Excel this quarter and then next quarter you start with QuickBooks and then you fall off because it looks crazy and you don't know how to use the software. You have to make sure that you try it on, test it out, make sure that it works for you. And if you see that it's not working, either you need to make some changes, or whomever is doing the bookkeeping, you want to make sure that you have that conversation with them. In business, we have to have those hard and uncomfortable conversations. And trust me, I'm not necessarily a fan of them, but it needs to happen in order for us to grow and in order for us to be successful as business owners. So you have to have those difficult, hard conversations as you go along. All right. So when you try it on, test it out, that helps you to make sure that you have a system that works. This way you can keep things consistent, right? Because if things are all over the place, there's no point, because it's going to take too much for you to pull everything together, right? So you can have some Excel and QuickBooks, and I wrote some down in a book. I took some pictures of a receipt here. That doesn't work. That causes chaos and frustration, similar to commingling, right? We want to step away from things that causes us time and causes us to be frustrated, right? We want to put systems in place that works. Okay. All right. So I get maybe not a question. I see a lot of the time that, a lot of people have more than one businesses, and we're living in an era where it's pretty common for that to happen, right? So if you have more than one business, the principle still remains. You do not commingle. You want to make sure that you track everything. The only thing is, it gets a little bit more difficult, challenging. It depends on who you are, because guess what? You're not only just focusing on one business over here, but now you have another one, and don't let it be three or more, right? It takes you to have more attention to detail. Make sure that things are going or taking place where they're supposed to, because you don't want to have business one over here paying for business two expenses, right? Don't do that. Okay. Business one pays only for business one. Business two pays only for business two. If you have more than one business, make sure that you seek out the professional assistance service that you need in order to organize your businesses accordingly. Because you cannot wear all the many hats for more than one company at the same time. You want to live, a life. You don't want to stress yourself out to the point where you can't operate either of them. So as you grow, as you begin to establish yourself as an entrepreneur, business owner, you want to make sure that you have the correct team in place, the right people in place to be able to account for the different businesses and the things that are happening. And sometimes you may need a different person for each business to enforce separation of duty. Okay. So again, business one does not pay for business two or business three expenses. Each of them need to pay for their own. And this is why you need to have an accountant on your team in order to keep track of all of these different business activities, and just try to be disciplined, try to adhere to the plan or strategy that may be put in place. And again, in situations like this, you may need to interview quite a few, I wouldn't say too many, but a couple accountants to see what works for you, if you and their style fit together. Okay. All right. So all in all, it may sound challenging or hard, but do it hard, because it's never going to be easy. If you take the easy route out, you will have difficulty and it will be hard in the long run, right? So as we're talking now about tracking it or losing it, let's say you decide to do the easy thing and not track anything, right? Don't track any expense. We go through the entire year. It's time to file your taxes. Then they're like, oh, I have to organize these. I have to do the bookkeeping. You did the easy thing throughout the year. Now your life is hard at the end of the year. Do the hard thing, which shouldn't be hard, but it's just one of those things, right? Do the hard thing. Track your expenses, track everything throughout the year, so that when you go to file your taxes next year, it's right there. Everything's right there, not even just for taxes. You need to be able to see how your business is operating. Do you have a profit, a loss? Like, is it a true profit or a true loss? Especially if you're commingling, you have to make sure that you're careful in tracking all your business expenses. Okay, so I know today I touched on a whole lot. I build on the commingling of fun aspect, where again, absolutely don't do that. And if you need tips to put in place to mitigate that, definitely rewatch lesson 1 of this series so that you can hear the different tips available. But once you get to that place where you're either not commingling or you're trying not to commingle, you want to make sure that you begin to separate yourself from your business and your personal business and personal. Okay, bank account, very important. You want to make sure that you have a separate business bank account. Well, for each businesses, you want to have a separate business bank account and use them accordingly. Okay. That's it for this week. We talked about a whole lot. Make sure that you connect with a professional like myself to make sure that you're doing things the right way. And not only the right way, but you're doing things in a way that is cost effective and efficient for you and your business, because you want something that works. If it doesn't work, it's going to tire you out, and you're not going to have the freedom that you became an entrepreneur for. You're not going to be able to build the wealth that you wanted to when you started this journey. So make sure you get connected with a professional. We can't do it all by ourselves. We're wearing so many different hats. We have to make sure that we're delegating accordingly and making sure that we're choosing the person that works best for us, that fits our style. Because again, one size doesn't fit all. I may not be the best person for you, and the next person may not, or the person after that could be great for you. You want to make sure that you kind of test it out, shop around, and see what works. Okay, so that's it for this week. Don't forget, every Wednesday at 7 p.m., I'll have a different lesson to teach during this series. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your fellow business owners, because trust me, people look great on the outside, but you never know what's going on the inside. And just one tip from one of these lessons can help them to, fix themselves up, sit up right. Let's get it together. Okay. Well, I do have to shout out some social media. If you want to follow me on social media, it's at The Accountant Therapist, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And then for my company, which is Brown's Fulfillment Consulting and Accounting Firm, it's at Brown's FCA. So that's it for this week. Thank you, all you business owners and entrepreneurs. Stay safe. Keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be great. You just need to make sure you have a solid foundation. That's it for this week. I'll see you next week.